Welcome to Talkin' Old School with Roger Franklin Williams, and welcome to tonight's special edition of Talkin' Old School, the first annual Tuskawilla Tussle football preview, hosted by Gators Dockside Winter Springs and presented by LaForest Wealth Management, and also sponsored by the Citizens Bank of Florida. We're coming to you from Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and we got a large, enthusiastic crowd of Lake Howell Silverhawks, and Winter Springs Bears joining us. I told you they were enthusiastic. I also want to welcome our co-host and one of the founders of the Tuskawilla Tussle Rivalry Week and Scholarship, former Apopka Blue Darter quarterback, also known as your retirement coach, Dan LaForest of LaForest Wealth Management. Before I go to Dan, I want to thank our host, Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and Steve Snow. And we'll talk to Steve during tonight's program more about the impact that Gators makes in giving back to the Lake Howell High School and Winter Springs High School communities, as well as youth sports in the Winter Springs, Lake Howell, and Tuskawilla community. I also want to thank Citizens Bank of Florida, who's been Seminole County's independent, service-oriented, community-focused hometown bank since 1946. And I'm pleased to let you know that Citizens Bank of Florida will be expanding to the Sanford area at the end of this year. Now to our presenting sponsor and one of the founders of the Tuskawilla Tussle Rivalry Week and the general manager of Gators Dockside Winter Springs. First of all, Dan LaForest and Steve Stowe.
Hey, Roger, thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, we wanted a game day atmosphere for this game, and I tell you what, the people have turned out and showed up.
We definitely got it. We got some enthusiastic Bears and Silverhawks here tonight, and I love it. In fact, we're going to talk to some of them later in our program.
Absolutely.
If they're not too shy to come on the radio, of course. Something tells me that I don't think they will be.
Nah, these people are pretty cheerful. We're going to have to see if we can actually keep them off the ceiling.
Well, Dan, of course, everybody here knows all about the Tuskawilla Tussle, of course, but we've got thousands of listeners throughout Central Florida who aren't quite up to date. Tell us about the Tuskawilla Tussle.
Well, it's ironic because this year Winter Springs celebrates their 20th year in existence. So back in 1998, there was a rezoning with Winter Springs High School becoming a new high school in Seminole County, and a lot of that student body came from Lake Howell High School. So it's a natural rivalry between the two schools, and So, the sports competition, the student body competition between the two schools has been magnetic.
Now, who's playing? Tell us about the Silverhawks of Lake Howell. Tell us about the Bears of Winter Springs and the dynamics of the football game, which is...
Well, which makes up the Tuskawilla Tussle, and that's really where the Tuskawilla Tussle name came from, was the fact that there's 5.5 miles that separates Lake Howell High School from Winter Springs. So it was a natural, I can't remember who came up with the name, but, it's been a great name for the rivalry. Once people really started to catch on and understand what that rivalry was. Unfortunately, today's sports aren't like they were back when we played. The rivalries were much bigger, and now they more focus on the college games and whatnot. But, we're excited to rehash out this rivalry and make it the exciting event it has been here the last few years.
No, absolutely. It's a classic, old-school neighborhood rivalry.
There it is.
And that's why I'm so excited to be a part of it.
And the thing is, your neighbor, we're a community. In Lake Howell and Winter Springs, a lot of these guys did go to elementary school together. They went to middle school together. And it just, from a zoning standpoint, they were split into two different areas. Or they played Pop Warner with or against each other, or even, played down the road within Class Athlete, which is another one of the sponsors we'll talk about tonight.
Now, in addition to the football game, in addition to the show we're doing now, this has been an entire week of activities and festivities. A central part and a very important part of Tuskawilla Tussle Rival Week is the scholarship, which is presented by your company, LaForest Wealth Management, by Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and by Class Athlete. Let's bring on Steve Snow now, General Manager of Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and have both of you guys tell us about the scholarship how it came about and the details of that. And again, Steve, thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here.
It's funny because Steve and I got together a couple years ago and started talking about what additional things can we do in this community that would, bring a little bit more enthusiasm. And we came up with the idea of having that scholarship. So up until this year, he and I have funded this primarily with our two companies, as well as selling these T-shirts that these students in the community is wearing to fund the scholarship. Now, the scholarship, I'll have Steve tell you about the scholarship here in a few minutes. But this year we've been very fortunate to add a third sponsor that really has great synergy within the community, which is Class Athlete. So, Roy, tell them a little bit about the scholarship and what we've done the last couple of years.
Well, as far as the scholarship goes, Dan and I were trying to figure out a way where we could be, a little bit more involved with the community and with the schools, specifically Winter Springs and Lake Howell, and we kind of talked about different things, and the scholarship was what made the most sense to us, and so we decided to put that in place, and I think so far it's done pretty well. I mean, it seems like it's growing, it's getting a little more excitement, and hopefully it'll build from this year, and we can raise a lot of money for a couple students from each school. There's going to be one female, one male athlete that letters 2 years at their program from Winter Springs and from Lake Howell. So we want to make sure that both schools have the proper respect paid to both programs. So
absolutely, and both of them are out in droves here tonight.
Yeah.
But both schools representing very well the Lake Howell Silverhawks and the Winter Springs Bears. Now, Steve, I'd like to talk to you more about Gators Dockside in general. First of all, couldn't have a more perfect host. I think a lot of people already know that Gators Dockside, Winter Springs, and the other Gators Docksides throughout Central Florida are a perfect place just to come out and hang and have good family fun and watch your games in any sport you can imagine, especially football. And praise God, football season is back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also, people may not know how active Gators Dockside is in the community, giving back to the community and things just like this Tuskawilla Tussle scholarship.
Sure.
And other things that you do to help support youth sports, high school sports in your various communities, and especially in Winter Springs. Can you please share with us about
Sure.
that community involvement?
Sure, absolutely. That's a good point. A lot of people know Gators Dockside is a sports family style restaurant where you can go and get some good wings, good burgers, good salads, things like that. But one of the things that I think has made us so successful, and what I think has made our company grow so well is our involvement with the community. I mean, we are involved with every program imaginable in the community, from flag football programs to softball programs to Pop Warner Little Leagues. We try and stay involved with anyone and everyone we can involved in the community, and it's win-win. I mean, they come and support us just like we support them. So I think it's really important if you're going to be part of a community that you help when they need help. So,
and one other thing I think is interesting about the scholarship aspect of the Tuskawilla Tussle rivalry week is both of you guys were athletes yourselves in high school.
We were, yeah.
And also you obviously have a heart for kids that are out there competing, and I think that's obviously led to the scholarship that you've come up with. Can both of you guys talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Steve was a wrestler at Lake Brantley, and I played baseball and football at Apopka, but the biggest thing that we wanted to do was it's tough these days. Not everybody's going to get a scholarship anymore. The number of high schools outnumber the number of colleges that have actually put the programs together over the last 15, 20 years. So a lot of these kids just need a little extra money to make it, and we don't have big scholarships, but we're trying to put something together that's multi-purpose. It's something that gives them a little bit of money into their pocket, but the idea is to pull a community together and put focus on the community, and I think we've done a pretty good job accomplishing that here for the last 3 years.
Steve, can you talk about your experiences as a high school athlete and why how that maybe has impacted your desire to give back to other high school athletes?
Sure.
And the community in general.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with Dan. The times have changed and there's not nearly as many opportunities for these kids. So I definitely agree with that. I know that as a high school athlete, I appreciated the involvement of the community of some of the businesses that were involved with the programs.
Absolutely.
And so with recognizing that as a high school athlete and utilizing some of that thought process, now in a position where I can do that, it just made sense. And then, having a partner like Dan and then Roy with Class Athlete, it seems like the perfect storm for us. So I feel like we can make a big difference in a lot of kids' lives, and so we're going to try to do that.
Absolutely. One thing that Steve said, talking about he can remember people that supported the Lake Brantley program when he was an athlete. So do I. I remember a lot of the people that advertised in the football program back in the day. So I think that's important. Why I'm so excited working with both of you guys, because you're not only committed to having a great business in your various lines of work, but you're committed to giving back and helping kids as they're coming along.
And I'll tell you, this really ties in because that was really my memory of growing up at Apopka and playing for Apopka was the fact that we had a very close-knit town. When we came over here to Lake Howell specifically, they don't belong to a city. There was no Mayor Land, proclaiming Blue Darter Day back in the day, And it, it was coming to guys like Steve and saying, hey, listen.
Yeah, that's why they need guys like you and Steve to proclaim Tuskawilla Tussle
And
Day.
it really, Steve and I have a friendship going on almost 10 years now, and it was starting out with, hey, let's find a way for us to work together to kind of generate some buzz and some attitude, and it's worked out really well. And to talk more about Gators Dockside, a lot of these high schools don't have quote unquote booster clubs, so they don't have a pool of money that funds. Each sport is responsible for doing their own fundraising. So you can imagine these businesses here like Gators Dockside that are getting hit by every sport at every level. And Steve has always been that community partner that this community can always count on.
That's great. Well, listen, guys, Steve and Dan, we're coming up on our first break. When we come back, of course, there's a football game involved in this.
Yeah.
I'm excited about talking about the football game.
The Tuskawilla Tussle. It's going to be live.
You got the Bears and the Silverhawks will duel. And a lot of excitement, a lot of backstory to that game. So after we take our quick break, when we come back, we'll continue to come to you from Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and then we'll talk about some of the dynamics of that game between the Bears and the Silverhawks.
Absolutely.
Listen to Talkin' Old School with Roger Franklin Williams coming to you from Gators Dockside Winter Springs at the 2017 Tuskawilla Tussle presented by LaForest Wealth Management. We'll be right back in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the 2017 Talkin' Old School Tuskawilla Tussle football preview presented by LaForest Wealth Management and the retirement coach Dan LaForest, hosted by Gators Dockside Winter Springs, and also supported by the Citizens Bank of Florida. Just a moment, we'll be joined by the principals of the two schools, Mr. Mike Kotkin, who's the principal of the Lake Howell Silverhawks, and Mr. Pete Gaffney, principal of the Winter Springs Bears. Of course, Dan LaForest is still with us as well. Before we go to Dan and our principals, I want to, of course, let you know that our program is supported by Citizens Bank of Florida, and let you know that Citizens Bank of Florida will be expanding to the Sanford area by the end of this year. Well, Dan, we've got two important people, special people joining us now.
Yeah.
It's great to see them out representing and supporting. And tell us who we have here now.
Well, we have the mayor of Winter Springs and the mayor of Lake Howell sitting up here with us. Mike Kotkin, the new principal at Lake Howell High School. And Mr. Pete Gaffney, who is the new principal at Winter Springs High School. Now, these guys have a pretty cool story. They're both graduated from Lake Howell in 1990. So they have come home. They have come home to the community to be leaders in the community and help in the community and mold these young minds here at both schools.
Absolutely. These guys have some history together. Let's go first of all to Mike Kotkin, principal of the Lake Howell Silverhawks. And Mr. Kotkin, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here.
And let's get Mr. Gaffney involved. Pete Gaffney, principal of Winter Springs. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. It was a great time by everybody.
And let me commend you guys right off the bat. Well, you certainly got an enthusiastic group of Bears and Silverhawks here representing and supporting your schools too.
Absolutely.
Go Silverhawks.
Well, why don't we start with Mike Kotkin and Mr. Kotkin? Just as Dan alluded to, you guys have some history. You as the principal of Lake Howell and Mr. Gaffney as principal of the Winter Springs. Tell us a little bit about the background. You know this guy a little bit, right?
Yeah, we've known each other a long time. I think probably since we're about 5 years old. We went to elementary school together, middle school together locally at Tuskawilla, and then we leave Tuskawilla to go to Lake Howell where we graduate together. Not many people that I can say this about, honestly, but we then go to undergrad together, go to graduate school together, and I'll let Pete tell the rest of the story, but it's pretty cool. No one else that I've known personally or professionally to have this relationship with.
And after all these years, you're still willing to be photographed with him and sit next to him on a radio show.
Yeah.
You might want him to look good.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty neat. I mean, just the fact that Mike and I, again, grew up together. I guess our career paths have just kind of mirrored each other all the way through. And for us to end up here at Winter Springs High and Mike over at Lake Howell, it just couldn't be better. It's a dream for both of us to support our schools that we are, and it's very exciting that he and I are sitting together tonight in front of both of you. We never would have dreamed when we graduated back in 1990 that we'd be here in 2017, Gators Dockside, talking on a radio show to you guys. It's awesome.
Promoting the Tuskawilla Tussle.
Absolutely.
Well, now that leads, I got to ask this next question. Now I know, and both of you guys look too young to be principals to me, but of course I'm old school. Legitimately old school, but Mr. Kotkin mentioned that, well, you guys both graduated in 1990 and you both went to Lake Howell. Now, Mr. Kotkin, I suspect there might be some teachers still at Lake Howell that were there when you guys were students, and I have to ask you this, what would have those guys said, or those men or women, the teachers, back in the day when you guys were students?
It's funny.
When somebody told them, these guys are two potential principals of our local high schools.
They would have laughed you out of the building. They would have probably suspended you and suspended us. No, I don't know that Pete or myself could honestly say that we'd ever thought that we'd have come home like this, in a capacity like this. I'm still driving up to Lake Howell every day, waiting for the first principal, Dick Evans, to say to me, "Get out of my parking spot. What are you doing in my office?" sort of thing. I shouldn't be there. And it's a privilege. It's an honor to be home. And never in a million years would I have dreamt that the two of us, there are other people that should have been most likely to be in education or to be a principal or whatever, to be successful. Pete and I'll speak for myself, absolutely not. Pete.
Yeah. One of the things I think about when I think of Mike is that when we were together as seniors at Lake Howell High School, and they said, we need a couple of coaches to coach the girls' powder puff football. Guess which two jumped at the chance to partner and be the two coaches?
Right.
And we were in it. This wasn't for fun. We were in it to win it. So that was one of the memories I have about Mike at Lake Howell High School. Involves football because he played in the football program. But then we joined forces and said, we're going to coach these senior girls to a victory against these juniors. And we had a great time doing it.
And so did your team win?
Of course we did.
Oh, yeah, we were coaching together. Of course we won.
35-10.
Silly question. He remembers the score.
Absolutely.
I have a
Offensive
feeling.
coordinator, defensive coordinator.
That's what
I have a feeling.
True
these
story.
Guys,
True
these guys,
story.
I have a feeling these guys went back and hit the yearbook in the library earlier today too. So,
guys, you're listening to Talkin' Old School. We have a special edition tonight. We're coming to you from Gators Dockside, Winter Springs. It's our first ever program highlighting the Tuskawilla Tussle, which is the battle between the Lake Howell Silverhawks and the Winter Springs Bears. I'm joined by co-host Dan LaForest, the retirement coach, regular contributor to Talkin' Old School, and also now by the principals of both schools, Principal Mike Kotkin of Lake Howell and Principal Pete Gaffney of Winter Springs. And I got to just mention somebody right here quickly as it came up. One of my coaches from back in the day, assistant football coaches, coached as an assistant in the early years at Lake Howell, and that was Coach Ed Zaremba.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to give a shout out to Coach Ed Zaremba. Whenever I think of Lake Howell, I think of Coach Zaremba, who was an excellent coach. Now I'd like to pick up and ask you guys, and we'll start with Principal Gaffney, Pete Gaffney. Tell us about that. And I think this is such a neat thing, and I'm really pleased that to be a part of it. Thanks to Dan and thanks to Steve Snow at Gators Dockside Winter Springs. This whole community aspect, the rivalry aspect of these two schools, because over the years the rivalry wasn't always there. But can you just tell us about, from your perspective, as alumni of the rival school now, what the Tuskawilla Tussle rivalry week, all the events, the scholarship, the game mean from your perspective now as a principal of Winter Springs High School?
Absolutely, and I didn't really realize how big this was until I met with Dan. Dan came and sat down in my office and obviously presented me the idea and what's happened with Tuskawilla Tussle in the past. I said to Dan, let's do it. Let's go for it. I knew my friend Mike was over at Lake Howell. I knew all about the shirts that I've seen around town. And I said, Dan, what can we do? Let's get this thing going. Mr. Talkin and I are going to do a fabulous job, not only this year, but leading into other years regarding this event. We can't do enough to celebrate both of our schools, highlight both of our schools, and then to have it culminating with a great game amongst great teams, great communities. It's just a win-win for everybody. So, thank you to Dan for doing this and putting this on. It's a privilege for us to be part of this.
Well, and I'll tell you, the other thing too is when you've been doing something for a couple of years and all of a sudden you hear you've got new administrators to deal with, a little bit is going, okay, I got to get in front of these guys.
Fear,
And I'll be honest with you, it's been a great change, and these guys were very welcome to me right away, and embraced the ideas. I'd already been working with Dania Harris over at Lake Howell High School for the last few years, and to work with Mr. Talkin and Mr. Gaffney, and then also, Winter Springs has a new athletic director in Scott Gomrad, and Jacob Jarzinka is the new assistant principal coming over from Montevideo. So, we've got a good group of sports-oriented administrators that are excited about the community. And I'm just excited for what this is and what it can be. What it is one thing, but what this potentially can be is what's really exciting.
And I'll just say very briefly, throw in, I know when you said, when you heard that Winter Springs had a new principal, or actually both schools had new principals, you had fear in your heart, because I've dealt with the same thing.
Yeah.
Dealt with doing what I do. We go, you have something going, a neat show idea about a rivalry or something, and somebody new comes along and you go to talk about it, and they look at you, what are you talking about, and why would we ever want to do that? And that's actually more the norm than the exception.
It is,
as we both know. So I really appreciate both of you. Scott, you guys have the heart for what you're doing, and just having a fun event for your students and the people of your community, your alumni.
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. This is about the community. Just like Pete talked about, what Dan has been talking to us about, and he's been a part of for all the years that he has. The superintendent talks about the AAA experience. He talks about academics. He talks about the arts and athletics. And there's something about a game in this area that just breeds that and gets people excited. They played Pop Warner together. They went to elementary school. They went to middle school. And now here they are at two schools who have a friendly rivalry. And, with Pete and I kind of standing at the helm of this, we're going to do our best to really just make sure this continues to be a very healthy one, one that these kids can grow up and wanting to become a part of it. And we just recognize the benefits to our community as a whole. We're really excited.
It's great for me to be here at Gators Dockside Winter Springs and see how many kids are here and how many kids are having fun, and and came here because they wanted to be a part of it and wanted to have a great afternoon of fun supporting their school.
Yeah, and let me add to that. This is such a great thing for culture. I mean, Mike and I are both big on school culture and creating a team spirit, creating culture around school, wearing purple and gold on Fridays, and having this to be part of it just makes it so much better. I mean, I walked in the door tonight, got a standing ovation just because I walked in the door. Just very, very exciting to be part of this. So thank you again.
And that's a great compliment from your students too, is having that relationship where they are doing that. They're excited to see their principal. Everything is so touch and go anymore in society. Is when you have somebody that you respect and you're excited to be around, it helps you create a better kid, and that's what hopefully we're all trying to do here, and why I've always enjoyed being part of this community is because we got some great kids.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody's got great kids, but I couldn't be more proud of the ones we have right here in our backyard.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, the fun, left, our culture, our society. That's what we're trying to do is do our little part to bring back some fun. Obviously, Dan's doing that. Steve and Gators Dockside Winter Springs are doing it. It's great to see that you guys think that you can have a quality educational experience with discipline, accountability, hard work, all those things, but have fun along the way too.
Yeah, and football is a big part of it. And when we were in 1990 at Lake Howell High School, and I'll let Mike talk a little bit about this, our football team back then in 1990 wasn't good. It was great. Mm-hmm. So, Mike, tell them a little bit about that football team.
Yeah, the late 80s, the early 90s, the emerging of, the Marquette Smith of the era, the Trevor Price. It was just everyone, the Kenny Times. Names were on the map because of that. And we're going to bring that excitement, that enthusiasm, and the kids wanting to be at our schools because they see the opportunities that lay beyond the walls of our school and see it as an opportunity to maybe take the next step to college and career. And it begins with what happens on Friday night. The pomp and circumstance of the cheerleaders, the marching band, all of that enthusiasm to go up to his stadium and to see the colors of the school, or to come up to mine and see the blue. And so it's exciting, and it gets people's heart just going.
And I've always called it that. It's not a football game, it's a production.
Yeah.
Because you've got the game, you've got the band. The bands at both schools are amazing. You've got incredible cheerleaders at both schools. And it is so much fun to go to a football game at the high school level. I remember, playing back in the day, and I remember how much fun it was. But until you get back as an adult and you get to go back and relive what you went through and try to tell these kids what they're going to be going through 10 years from now, they'll remember this. And hopefully we'll be sitting here 10 years from now. They can come back and watch this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You talk about culture and one of the things that I think Mike and I are both trying to do with our communities is reach out to them. Our athletic director, Scott Gomrad, just last week visited all the elementary schools in the area, visited all the middle schools in the area, promoting to come to the high school, be part of something special. Our high schools are the cornerstone of our areas. We want people to think of the high school as that's where I want to be. That's the place that's going to be opportunities to be successful.
And honestly, that's what we've been missing because we have had that disconnect. And I'm glad to see you guys promoting that connection because it's kind of been like, okay, here's the middle school. Well, we can't talk to them. And the reality is we are the end result. We have to get the elementary schools excited about. I remember playing at Apopka football when I was at Zellwood Elementary.
Right.
And in Apopka Junior High. Yeah. And going to see a Rodney Brewer and a Sammy Smith play. When you have that kind of enthusiasm, we're going to go see Lake Howell play this Friday night. It is a big deal, and when the community buys into that, and we do a good job with the Pop Warner and the CYFL programs, inviting them in to come see a Lake Howell football game, a Winter Springs football game. It is a big deal for these youngsters to have an idol, to have somebody to look up to.
Positive.
And these high school kids can be that and have been.
And the kids come into school with goals, aspirations, with a focus already, which makes them, just more likely to have success, frankly. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we we'll come back with our final segment. We'll talk some football. In fact, I want to get, these guys went to school together. I want to hear them talk about their respective teams, and I want to find out from these guys, I'm talking about the principals, of course, who's going to win the game. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll continue our program. You're listening to the Talkin' Old School 2017 Tuskawilla Tussle football preview, which is the battle between the Lake Howell Silverhawks and the Winter Springs Bears, hosted by Gators Dockside Winter Springs and sponsored by LaForest Wealth Management. And I also want to say a word about our sponsor, Citizens Bank of Florida, as well. Citizens Bank of Florida will soon be expanding into the Sanford area by the end of 2017. Stay with us. We'll be right back on Talkin' Old School, coming to you from Gators Dockside Winter Springs, talking about the 2017 Tuskawilla Tussle. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 2017 Talkin' Old School Tuskawilla Tussle football preview, presented by LaForest Wealth Management and hosted by Gators Dockside Winter Springs and sponsored by the Citizens Bank of Florida. We're still joined by principals Mike Kotkin of Lake Howell and Pete Gaffney of Winter Springs. Of course, Dan LaForest is our co-host. Now this final segment, we're going to talk some football. We're going to break down the teams, and we might even talk to some players and cheerleaders and fans and supporters of the two teams, if they're not too camera shy, of course. We're also pleased to be joined in this segment by Jacob Garzinka, who is over at Winter Springs now as assistant principal, of course, formerly of Oviedo High School as athletic director and football coach. And boy, very impressive, coach.
Thank you very much.
Got your cheer squad, yeah.
Yes.
Already got off to a good start at Winter Springs. It's great to see that.
Traded in that whistle for a tie.
And before we go back to our show, I want to once again remind you that our program is sponsored by Citizens Bank of Florida, and let you know that the Citizens Bank of Florida, of course, is your independently owned, service-oriented, community-focused community bank since 1946, and Citizens Bank will be expanding into Sanford by the end of this year. Now, let's go back to Dan LaForest, co-host. And Dan, let's kind of like talk about football. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this game, and there are a lot of interesting aspects, but one of the ones which I think adds a little incentive is that both teams will be looking for their first win of the season in this game.
You know, and the thing is the weather's really played a part into both programs.
Of course, Winter Springs got a game postponed against
postponed.
Hagerty.
So, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies right now with pretty much Central Florida football, just from a scheduling standpoint. But yeah, you know, I think both schools are hungry for their first win. You know, from my analysis of both programs, it's going to be that Tuskawilla Tussle we always have always loved. I mean, last year it was a track meet.
What was the score last year?
It was 56 to 42. Lake Howell pulled it out 56-42. I mean, when was the last time you went to a high school football game where there was 100 points on the board? It was amazing. So
sounds like an exciting game.
So the Winter Springs Bears are a little hungry for a victory this year. Because that Tuskawilla Tussle trophy's been sitting very comfortably up at Lake Howell High School. So, you know, I have a feeling Coach Smith and the Winter Spring Bears are ready to come bring that trophy home. And I know Coach Wenzel and the Silverhawks are just as eager to keep it right where it is. So it's going to be an interesting game.
Now, let's go back. I'd like to talk just a little bit more about background before we move forward. And you know, two of the interesting things about Lake Howell High School that I do want to mention is, of course, one thing they've got, I've learned over the course of this year doing the various programs we've done, some of the best facilities of any high school in Central Florida. And then also as very hardcore, old school Central Florida football fans know, and that represents a lot of our audience, but other people might not know that, you know, Lake Howell used to be a very strong football program to the point where of all the high schools around Central Florida or even Florida, Lake Howell probably has more guys that have played in the National Football League than most schools.
Yeah, you know, that's something that you and I did a show a couple months ago. I was talking about the strength of high school football in Central Florida. And, you know, what is the high school with the most players in the NFL? And that is Apopka. Number 2 was Evans, and number 3 is Lake Howell with 9 former alumni that has played in the NFL in the last 2 decades.
And now I'd like to talk a little bit about Winter Springs, and we'll do new assistant principal Jacob Garzinka. What are some things about Winter Springs High School you'd like for our audience to know about?
Well, you know, Winter Springs High School was built, 20 years ago, and so we're still building our culture. You know, we're still a young school, but we've had some great players that have come through. Altrique McBurst, Lars Anderson. I can remember as a football coach going against those players and watching them. Tony Secretario, who's now our offensive line coach, was a great player. He's a weightlifting state champion. So we're building that culture there at Winter Springs High School, and we're really excited about what Coach Smith and the boys are going to be doing, finishing this season, going strong this season and continuing in the future.
And thinking of Lake Howell, and thanks for some great insight into Winter Springs. And hopefully this Tuskawilla Tussle event, I'm sure it will be a part of building that culture. And I see an esteemed Lake Howell alumni. We've got a lot of not just cheerleaders, players, students here tonight, but we got a lot of alumni and supporters as well. I see an esteemed Lake Howell Silverhawk alumni, Grant Malloy, former two-term county commissioner in Seminole County, and currently the clerk of court and comptroller for Seminole County.
Right.
Dan, what do you see if Grant might have a word to say here?
Yeah, come on, Grant.
Yeah. We'll get the microphone over to you.
It's just great seeing the community atmosphere here with Winter Springs. and Lake Howell together. I think that's great. And Seminole County's a great place. A lot of great people here. So I'm glad to see you guys promoting it.
Yeah, one of the great things about high school football, as we talked about earlier, is the alumni and fans that help get involved and support the schools as well. Now, Dan, let's talk about some football. I'm sure some of our esteemed cheerleaders out here. We've got some players out here. We've got other students, fans. Let's hear from some of them.
All right, give me your name and school you go to.
I'm Hannah Gottwalt, and I go to Winter Springs.
And you're a senior cheerleader, is that right? Yeah. So tell me what your experience being a senior. What is your experience going to Winter Springs? What has this meant to you?
Going to Winter Springs has meant so much to me. It's such a good community, and we have a ton of school spirit, even though it's not always shown. Everybody loves Winter Springs, at least a little bit. So it's been really fun.
Well, congratulations on your upcoming graduation, and we wish the best for you. What's your name?
Tanner Waters.
And Tanner, you're a senior cheerleader at Winter Springs as well, right?
Yes, sir.
So tell me about the Tuskawilla Tussle and what this rivalry means to you.
All right, it's really two football teams getting together as a community. We're gonna have a lot of fun once we beat Lake Howell and get the trophy back.
I think the gauntlet's been thrown down.
But it's really about getting the community together and getting them engaged and just bring everyone together and have a lot of fun.
And that's wonderful, and that's exactly right. So what's your name, young lady?
I'm Caitlin Santiago. I go to Lake Howell.
So tell me about your experience at Lake Howell High School and what it means to be a Silverhawk.
Honestly, being a Silverhawk means so much to me. I feel like our school is so close together. We're all such a family, and we all come together for the games, and we all just want to beat the Bears.
Now, what's your name?
I'm Lacey Kenroy. I go to Lake Howell.
And what has the Tuskawilla Tussle rivalry meant to you your years here?
To us, the Tuskawilla Tussle is kind of like a way for our whole school, and even Winter Springs, we talk to each other here and there, but at the end of the day, we're all shooting for the same goal. We're all striving for the same thing. We all want to beat each other. That's pretty much what we're doing, and we come together as a school. We're a family. We come together with the same goal, and we're all doing the same thing, and we want to beat the Bears. So
that's that seems to be the general consensus. What's your name?
Summer Nazario.
And Summer, you're obviously a Winter Springs cheerleader. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what it means to be a Bear.
So being captain of the Winter Springs Bears is probably the most exhilarating thing I've done, just because the Bears are so close and loving, and we're literally a family here. So I guess, yeah.
And Dan, let me jump in and say to our listeners who might be wondering, we're actually recording our program on Wednesday night at Gators Dockside, Winter Springs, and a lot of the kids are here. As you're hearing this, listeners, they're out there at the game right now, competing and cheering, and the game is going on as we speak, literally.
Yeah, we actually have some Silverhawk alumni in the house. Man, what's your name?
Janet LaForest.
Oh, you sound familiar. My wife is a Silverhawk alumni. So, this is great when we can do something like this and have the students and the administrators and the community and our government leaders coming together and doing.
And Dan, we got about 5 minutes. Let's kind of talk about some of the dynamics of the game. And we got a football coach right over here. Now he's wearing Winter Springs purple, but of course, Coach, just tell us from your perspective. What does Winter Springs, what do the Bears have to do to bring that trophy home to Winter Springs?
Well, Coach Smith has actually put me on huddle, so I've actually watched film on both teams and kind of know where both teams sit right now. Both teams are looking for their first win, but you can kind of throw the records out no matter whether both teams were undefeated when you play a rivalry game. I think that it's going to come down to the line play. I think both teams have dynamic athletes on the edge, but, it comes down to the line in most games, and I foresee this being offensive, defensive lines are going to dictate how this game is played. It could be a really high-scoring game, or it could be a really low-scoring game, just depending upon what type of line play we get from both teams on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I actually agree. This is probably two of the largest offensive, defensive lines I've seen in the last few years within these two schools. a little bit of young guys. We have some young, skilled guys, I think, on both sides. So it's pretty evenly balanced from a standpoint. Sometimes you have a team that's heavy seniors, and this year I think it's going to be. I agree. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be a dogfight in the trenches.
Now let's go back to Principal Kotkin of Lake Howell. Can you share some of your thoughts, just perspective from the football game aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at Lake Howell's offensive line, they're young, they're big kids. Just really what I see as a strength of the program, and of course the skill guys, the guys out on the edges. Just a young, developing team. That I think as the season goes on will mature. Coaches will have them ready to play tomorrow night. After all, it's a rival. The records are out of the window, but I can tell you they will be ready to go.
Yeah, and one thing I think that even adds to the intensity is, fact, as I said, Lake Howell comes in 0-2, Winter Springs 0-1 because you had one game postponed. Somebody's going to have a chance to get that first win and walk away getting on the winners winners column, and I think that adds powerful incentive to the game as well.
Yeah, it's like you said before. I mean, when you're looking for that first win, it's nothing like the rivalry game. I mean, from a rivalry game, if you went 1-9, as long as that one is against your rivalry, you're going to smile all year. Now, nobody wants to go 1-9, but it'll make it a heck of a lot less painful if you beat your rival. But I expect a lot of both of these programs. They're coached by two great guys. David Wenzel's done a wonderful job at Lake Howell High School. He has built a foundation that I think this community can be proud of. And I think Jacob, agree with me, is Coach Smith has done a very good job as well over at Winter Springs.
Yep, I've worked with both guys and gotten to know both guys. I was at Lake Howell in 2010 with Tom Oliver, so I've actually had the opportunity to work at both schools. And Dave's done a really nice job over there as far as developing a program, and so has Coach Smith at Winter Springs. So I think it'll be a hard-fought battle between two teams this Thursday night.
Well, guys, we're down to about our last minute and a half. And Dan LaForest, I want to thank you for all your support putting this whole, not just our show together, but helping to put this whole event together and getting it started a couple years ago.
I tell you, I couldn't be prouder of the opportunity. This community is my home. It's the parents, the teachers, and obviously the kids. They all mean something to me, and I'm just blessed to be a part of doing something like this.
And want to, of course, thank Steve Snow, our host at Gators Dockside Winter Springs. And he does tremendous work. Gators Dockside Winter Springs is not just a fun place to hang out like we're having fun now. We're going to have any more when we sign off. But it also gives back and supports all these kids and these schools.
I'll tell you what, too, and the thing is I want to take a moment, too, to say, everybody stay safe. We got a tremendous weather situation this weekend, and our safety is the number one priority. It looks like it's going to hit us at some level on Sunday. So if anybody's looking for something to do on Saturday, come to Gators Dockside, show them how much we appreciate the work they've done in our community.
And I want to thank Principal Mike Kotkin of Lake Howell High School, Principal Pete Gaffney of Winter Springs High School, Assistant Principal at Winter Springs, Jacob Garzinga. And I want to thank everybody. Kids, thanks for being here. Cheerleaders, players, fans, alumni. Thanks for being here on the Talkin' Old School Tuskawilla Tussle football preview. And thanks to our producer, Simon. That's going to be it for tonight. Go Bears and go Silverhawks.